Welcome to a new episode of the Cartridge Club, where we discuss our game of the month with members of the Cartridge Club community. If you've played along, you can always share your own experiences in the forums at cartridgeclub.org or in our community's Discord or across social media by using the hashtag PlayAlongWithPrime. Hello everyone, it's RocketSauce, and I'm back to host for this month, where the Cartridge Club played The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Joining me on the show, we have community members Jake from Polykill, Chris from Flock of Nerds, and the MightyQDawg himself. Now join us as we look back on this Nintendo 64 classic. Yeah, I'll just start by saying, after this game came out in 1998, and I just played it again for the Cartridge Club, and even still now to this day, this is still my favorite game of all time. Now, I don't want to push this, bully people into saying, I thought this game was okay. It's fine. It's your opinion, but I still love this game. All these little reminders after playing this game, like walking up the stairs to fight Ganon for the final battle, was like, it still brings back great memories for me, and it still plays great. Like, I know some people have their gripes about that Nintendo 64 controller, but to me, that this game was so well designed for it that I think plays great with the Z targeting and lining up the items on the C buttons. It just feels great to me. And maybe it has to do with this being like the first, I wouldn't say it's the first Zelda game I beat. Actually was the first Zelda game I beat, but it wasn't the first Zelda game I played. I remember as a kid thinking the original was too intimidating, not knowing where to go. All of a sudden you only have 3 hearts, then you're dead. And I coming from Mario, where you just go from left to right, and then you're at your end of the screen, it was much easier to follow. What the original Zelda was just a little too complicated for me. But by the time Ocarina of Time came out and all the hype that was for it, I decided to give the Zelda franchise another go, and I fell in love with this game. I remember a bunch of buddies in grade school got it, and this is the time when you could do a 3-way conversation on the phone. So I remember that was kind of a big deal in getting a couple of buddies on the phone and saying, "Where are you at? Hold up, I'm not there yet." And we'd just be like, not want to spoil it for each other. It is my favorite game in the series, so I don't know. That's just some of my overall thoughts. Jake, what are you thinking of when you think of Ocarina of Time?
I think for me, it's easily in the conversation for what I would consider one of the greatest games of all time, and one of my favorite for sure. I think I was, probably similar. I got it really close to release. I don't know if it was release day, but my sister and I played it. I think we beat it the first weekend that we got it. We stayed up like all night, 2 nights in a row, just, nonstop playing that game. And I think what I remember most about it, like even now, is just some of the really inventive mechanics that I just hadn't experienced before. It was a 3D semi-open world. It was kind of zones or regions, but you could just kind of go anywhere you wanted, and you had this targeting mechanism, which I still think is one of a massive innovation that still continues to now. Yeah, just the magic of the game. Like, it's just, I don't know, the great characters, the great level designs, the temples. I mean, I know we'll get into all of that, but like, I'm just just really great memories, and I do think it is my favorite in the series. I've beaten a few others. Nostalgia obviously plays a big role in that, but for me, it's just one of the best, easily.
Yeah, Ocarina of Time was probably why I bought a Nintendo 64, and we had played kind of as a family, but they all watched me play, but my mom and my dad were pretty into watching other people play video games when I was a kid. So we played through the original Legend of Zelda, The second one was hard. Everyone knows the second one's hard, and I could get kind of to the end, but then my dad would kind of play the very end of it. And then we got the third one, and that was like 2 weeks of just sitting in front of the TV with the family playing this game while my mom was like, get that ruby over there. It was amazing. I have no problem with the controller. I don't know. I guess some people have a problem with the controller, but it's perfect for that game. And yeah, sure, the Z targeting, all of that stuff. But the world that you could run around in, going and just getting lost for hours in like one part of the world, trying to figure out what this part was about, the atmosphere that the game built, it is my favorite game of all time. It's, rose-colored glasses now. It's not, maybe when I went back and played it on the 3DS, it wasn't as engrossing as it was the first time I played through it. But the story, the characters, just a fantastic time. And yeah, it's my favorite game too.
Okay, well, this was my first time playing this, and I guess it's been about 22 years or so since the game came out. And I was aware of it in '98. I didn't get my Nintendo 64 until a few years later, and I bought the game. I actually bought the game about a week before I got my Nintendo, and then I never touched the game until the Cartridge Club said, we're going to do Ocarina of Time. And I said, oh, good, I can finally get this thing off my backlog because I've been using it as a blockage. It's been blocking every other Zelda game after it that I wanted to play because I thought I really have to play Ocarina first, right? That's the one that kind of set the standard for everything that came after it. Up until this point, I had only played NES Zelda, the first one, and A Link to the Past for the Super Nintendo. And I don't know if playing it 20 years after the fact changes anything or not. You guys have talked about the Z targeting and all the innovations. What I saw was just a really polished and excellent game. I don't know that I was blown away by any of this stuff. To be honest, I struggled a little bit with the Z targeting. Sometimes I could get it to work. Sometimes it's like, why isn't this thing latching on? But it was a very well done game. And when I first saw it, I was kind of looking at the map and thinking, okay, well, this isn't going to be a very big game, right? There's not much here, right? There's this big field, but then there's just these little areas. But it's a huge game for the cartridge, and there's a lot there. There's a lot of stuff there, and it's really well done, and I really enjoyed it. And it's been a long time since I played the other Zelda games, so I don't know how I'd rank it against A Link to the Past, but I don't know if it's recency bias or not, but it's definitely up there, and I really enjoyed some frustrations, but I really did enjoy this game. And I don't know if it's my favorite game of all time, but I can certainly understand why it is people's favorite game of all time.
I think it also has to do with, granted this game came out over 20 years ago, and if someone like you can play it today for the first time and still find it fun, I still think that kind of puts its merit as why it's a good game or a great game in people's eyes. Because imagine this coming out way long ago. We have all these other games now that have probably taken lots of little bits and bytes from this game as inspiration. There's, horse riding. This first game I can recall, like riding on a horse, just like the temple designs and puzzles. I know some people might not see it. Playing it today's time, it might not be your favorite game, but I think just the influences it's had over the last few generations of games has come a long way. It wasn't the first open world game, but it kind of like helped set what beats can be in an open world game, if that makes any sense. Bringing up that memory, Chris, that you had about getting it around Christmas time, right? Or right around launch. I remember going on Black Friday and waiting in line because the hype was real for the game. And I think they were saying it was hard to get that year. And there was 2 left at KB Toys. And we had to wait in the line to get there. And they, at the time, KB Toys had it behind the counter. So you had to wait your turn. You couldn't just get it and hold it in your hands. You had to wait and hope that someone didn't do it. And I think there was actually probably 3, because I believe a person in front of us, probably 10 people in front of us, got a copy, and then you're just hoping and praying that other 2 copies no one takes, and no one did. Got my copy, and I then had to wait, the following weeks until Christmas until I could play it. But yeah, this just some more memories I have from just this game. So
I remember it was big back then. I mean, I wasn't paying much attention, but I there was a lot of hype for this game. And I don't know in '98 what that was like, but I mean, there were a couple of games I knew, like Final Fantasy VII, which I think came out the year before. But I remember there was a lot of anticipation for this game.
You know, and that's another good point. It's kind of whatever your school was, you know, if you were Team Nintendo or PlayStation or even Sega from that point in time. I kind of want to say that, like, that was your argument for why your console was better. It's, you know, people who were PlayStation, people said, well, we got Final Fantasy VII, and the people had Nintendo 64, which the majority of my grade school was Nintendo 64 for my class. So it was kind of like the bragging rights. This is our game, you know. So.
Yeah, it's interesting to think what that we could compare that to now in terms of hype around the game or anticipation for a game, because I don't know, I wasn't like hugely tapped into video game marketing and communities at the time. You know, I was young. I was 14, I guess, but it was perfect. It's one of those things that I knew would be good because you grab a Nintendo Power and you read the hype, and you know they're obviously trying to sell it to you. It's Nintendo propaganda, and I get it, but it was it's just one of those things that just seared in my brain a little bit. It's my favorite game on that console for sure, and of that generation easily. But yeah, it's fun kind of looking back at it from all these different perspectives, because like I was in a vacuum. Like I saw a Mario 64 in a Walmart and I was like, that's awesome, I want to play that. And then after that, like I didn't really pay much attention to what other games were coming out, and you know there weren't websites that I was aware of, so I just grabbed that one because it was Nintendo Power, and you know just blew me away after that.
Yeah, the only time I ever cared about if a console was better than another console was with the N64. The N64 was my ride or die.
Yep.
So
still to this day is for me.
Yeah, I could not care about anything else that came after it. It's all about what I bought at the time and what had better games to me that I actually wanted to play, not necessarily better. But N64 was the one that I was like, oh, no.
Willing to die on the blade for it. Yeah. I still say PlayStation 1 is trash. It gets people upset, but there's games I like on it, but it's just, you know, same wheelhouse. You know, when it comes to this games too, I guess we should talk a little bit about the story. For me, this was kind of learning Zelda's history too, as this one really was my dive into the franchise. So learning about the Triforce and how it splits off into three, was created by three goddesses that eventually formed it. And I don't know, it was one of those things where you start off as a kid, and I think the marketing was, at least when I remember commercials for it, Link was an adult the entire time in the pictures and the commercials I saw for it. So when it started off me as a kid, I'm like, what is this? And it's the last thing you know, as a kid, well, I want to play as a kid. I'm like, no. When do I get to be an adult here? And eventually, by the time you get the 3 Spirit Stones and you unlock and you go to the Temple of Time, I remember like you finally become an adult and you pull that sword out of the stone. I was like, yes, this is what I want. This is exactly what I want. And then that's when the game really felt like, all right, now we're going on an adventure. And we start off as a kid, and you have to go back and forth a couple times for side quests. But to me, when that happened, I was just like, this is what I wanted.
But even that first zone, the first forest zone when you're a kid and the game starts, and all the way up to, getting out of that forest zone, just the economy of that first zone, how much they do with, like, as little as there is there. Like, there's the jerk, the bully, there's your friend, there's a few, like, older forest people that are still kids regardless. But then, like, and how far away that tree feels, the I don't remember the name of it.
The great Dooku tree?
How it feels like it's in a separate area. The whole place is so small. And then, like, how they're able to develop the personalities of each of those characters with so little. Like, just modern games, they like try to do so much, and like this does so much with so little.
Even the presentation where you see like Queen, the first boss, right, in the Deku tree, that Queen Goma. and it's that little spider thing that shoots like frog creatures at you, and you have to target it with the eye, and it's the whole presentation. The battle doesn't start until you look up at the top of the screen, and that's when it drops down and you have to fight it. The storytelling, you're right, it's just a presentation, and then eventually after you leave that forest, and then it presents Hyrule Field to you. It's kind of it's presented very, at the time that was huge. Like that was like this level, it's endless, and now you see games today like Breath of the Wild, which is I don't know, let's say probably 20 times the size of it.
I thought the game, what's the word for it, expanded. It opened itself up in a very nice way. People, I've heard in the 20 years that the game's been out, people have been talking about, the first time they get to Hyrule Field and there's this vast expanse. But even with that, I still felt that it was controlled. I kind of knew, okay, well, the castle is over here, and I had to go find, how to get up to Death Mountain and stuff. So maybe I'm just not an explorer, but the game opened up very nicely for me. Even though we got into this expanse of Hyrule Field, I still felt that there was some containment, and I kind of knew where to go, and I wasn't overwhelmed by everything opening up.
Yeah, that's actually my favorite kind of world design. Like I don't mind a nice big open world, but I don't like something that's so overwhelming and jarring that I'm paralyzed. I really think in maybe a bit of a leap, but I really do think God of War from a couple of years ago really built its world a lot like Ocarina of Time, where it's like, here's a big area you can go explore. It's not infinite. It's walled off, but you kind of just know where to go. Mm-hmm. And then you move to another area that's of equal size, more things to explore, more things to do. It's not overwhelming. It's just parsed out and just kind of builds on itself like that. And I prefer that. And I think maybe Ocarina of Time is why.
Yeah.
Well, and there's also this, like, when you go to an area in Ocarina of Time, especially at the beginning, but even later on in the game, like you go to the water temple, or you go to that fire. I don't remember which one was the second boss, the second big area in the kid part. I know the water one.
Yeah, it's like King Dodongo, his cavern.
Yeah, King Dodongo's cavern.
Yeah.
You go into the cavern, or you go into the fish, and then you're there, and it's very small. Like you're in a cavern, or you're in a fish. You're in a small confined area. But then when you're done, you never have to go back, and the place just opens up again. And I really like that about Ocarina of Time. You never have to go back to an area really once you're done with that area. There's no backtracking. Like I have come out of the fish. I had an adventure in the fish. Now I'm in the field again. Like it goes into itself. It goes small, and then it goes big, and it has like really good beats that way.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I agree.
Now you can go back if you script going for Gold Scatulas. You have that option, but you don't have to. That's a perfect, perfect logic.
There's no quest that makes me go back to a place to get 5 quests to go to another place, and then makes me go back to ugh.
Yeah, and I guess I kind of prefer a linear experience a little bit more. I love the fact that this is an open world and I can do whatever I want. I can recall going back, and I've done this numerous times, but especially at the time when I was a kid and I didn't have many video games, and I can just go fishing. I could just go and fish, and I would do that for hours because it was a game inside a game. I didn't have to go to the next temple, but hey, if I want to go kill some time, if I just want to, I have an hour to play some video games, I'm going to go fish in Ocarina of Time. And I love the fact that I know where to go next. I don't have to, but I know where to go. So it makes, I think, exploring more, I don't want to say enjoyable, probably, but like I love not being lost. I know exactly I have to go to the mountains. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. I'll go there. I know where the mountains are because I can clearly see where the mountains are. So,
I really like that aspect of the game, Ryan, what you were just talking about, where, there to me, it felt like there were 2 phases to the game, right? So let's say I know I have to go to this dungeon, right? So I'll spend, and I'll embarrass myself. You guys maybe saw the stream. I'll spend a few hours in some dungeon, right? and you're doing that thing, and you've got a goal, and you got to beat the boss, and then you're done with the dungeon, and it's like, okay, well, I know where to go next, but I've got this open world. I can do all these other things like go fishing, go do the horse thing, play the mini games, and do all that stuff. So I ping-ponged back and forth between, okay, now I'm in a phase where I got to go do this dungeon. Now I'm in a phase where I can do all this extra stuff like find bottles, find hearts, do whatever. And I found that really enjoyable. And part of it is because I knew where to go next. I was purposely or choosing to spend my time doing those other things, not just wandering around saying, okay, well, I don't know what to do next, so I'm just going to do these things. So I found that an enjoyable back and forth in the kind of game that I was playing, at least.
It may just something that's a modern comparison. I know people, I love Breath of the Wild. It's a fantastic game, but it's very intimidating compared to Ocarina of Time, because it's granted it's kind of more designed to like how the first Zelda game was, where you can go anywhere. You just go anywhere, and it doesn't matter what order you do it. But I kind of like having a direction, just knowing where to go. I don't know, and I guess that relates to the items, because they want you to get these items in that order too. And so every that should be a clue for newcomers to Ocarina of Time, that whatever the dungeon item is, it's almost going to be the key to beating the boss. Like getting the extended hook shot in the water temple makes the boss fight against the Morpha, I think is what it's called, because you can just yank its core out of the water and then stab it. As opposed to letting it come and grab you can actually fight her prior to coming through. I think that's also a key to a lot of the game. Is it's the clue. It gives you a lot of clues, and watching you play it, Eric, and watching Lusty play it on your streams, it's kind of fun. I know I get excited because I've beaten this game like hundreds of times, so I'm like, no, what? Like when you were fighting the octopus on your stream in Jabu Jabu's belly prior to taking the elevator part, and I know what it is. It's the boomerang, because you have to get it from behind. You have to hit it on its backside, and I just know to get it to stop and spin, you have to hit it for the boomerang. And I'm trying to give Melissa hints to give you hints to know what you got to do here, because I've beat it hundreds of times. But it's fun seeing it. Seeing people beat it other ways, because there's ways that I never knew you could beat stuff in this game. So seeing something like on Musty's stream using the Deku nuts against Ganon in the final form or something like that, it's or I've seen people use an empty bottle against Ganon's light attack too. That's another light attack. It's nice. Wow. Yeah, these little things like that that actually that you can beat this game multiple ways, which is kind of, it doesn't handicap you, but it's just, I think, neat that it's up to your preference of how you want to play the game.
Can I comment on that? Because so you're absolutely right. And I actually watched some videos after the fact about people beating bosses. And it took me a while to learn that the dungeon item is a good hint about what you should do. But the bosses did have a lot of different ways to beat them. But one thing that I found myself feeling like, at least when I played this game, and this is sort of contrary to that, is I often felt like I was playing an adventure game in the sense that, and what I mean is those old LucasArts adventure games, because there were a lot of places in the game where there were puzzles. And this is kind of a theme that I might come back to, is how much of a puzzle game I felt like this was, or an adventure game. There were times where I felt like the game was overly constrained in the kinds of items or things I could do. I found myself in certain places like, okay, and this happened with Musty too, is, okay, I'm just going to sit here, I'm going to play whatever tune it is until I get the right one, or I'm going to try every item until I get the right one. And there were times, and this would probably be my biggest complaint about the game, is there were times where I felt overly constrained, not in the boss fights, but in other places where it's like, why isn't this working? Why do I use a bomb to open up this hole in the ground, but this hole in the ground, I have to use the Song of Storms or something? And so there were times where I felt like it was just try everything until I got it to work.
Yeah, I get that. I think, obviously that was some of that's constraint to the technology and some of that's just design. But I could totally see that. And I do think the one thing that we're kind of arriving at here is that, like, this is just especially for the time, an incredibly well-designed game in terms of like how it feeds you information and how it gives you hints. And it almost reminds me, I don't know if you guys watch James Bond movies, but like especially some of those classic ones where it's like Q shows James Bond a gadget that really would only ever have one context to use it in, and by the end of the movie, Bond finds himself in that context and it works. Like, that's the way a lot of those dungeons were designed, where it's like, you need to shoot an arrow through this flame to light something on fire on the other. You only do that one time, but you have to do it, and we're going to show you how.
You know, there was one point in my playthrough where I had done that thing, right? And I shot an arrow through a flame to do something. And then I got to, and we're okay talking about a little bit of spoilers, Ryan. We got to the ice cavern, and there's a blue flame, and there's something on the wall or something. And I'm like, okay, I know exactly what to do. The game taught me. I'm supposed to shoot my arrow through this blue flame, and it'll do what I need to do. And I'm like, oh, no, wait, no, that didn't work. It's a completely other kind of puzzle. So,
and yeah, I know that there is a way to beat the forest temple boss that isn't tucking myself into a corner and shooting the hook shot at it every time it comes through, because there's that one corner that it won't hit you ever. I know that there's a way to do it. I know that that's like a cheesy way to do it, but I have no idea, because that is the only way I beat that boss. And it took me hours to figure it out the first time, because there's no internet. There's no internet that I can log on to that tells me how to do it. So I had to like figure out how to beat that boss, because that boss to me is unintuitive how to beat that.
Are you talking about Ganon, or are we talking about
it's Phantom Ganon, right?
Phantom Ganon, yeah.
Yeah, in the forest temple.
So
I could not figure that boss out until I found out that I could tuck myself into a corner.
I know we're kind of skipping around the story, but I don't think that's important at all. The main story is, there's Ganon, he's bad. There's Zelda, she's good, and Link teaming up with Zelda, you want to eventually team up to beat Ganon. I know there's more story to it, but play for yourself. It's not the most overly complicated story, but I just want to say, bringing up that point, since you're talking about temples, I kind of want to shift to temple talk, because now that you mentioned the forest temple, that one, I think for me as a kid, was the most probably difficult out of all the temples in the game. And I love the battle with Phantom Ganon too, because it kind of is a prep for the final battle, and it throws it in kind of early, so I'm like, whoa, I'm fighting Ganon right away, and then you find out it's a fake and whatnot. But that one, I remember really, that one, and maybe the Shadow Temple. I know people have their gripes about the Water Temple, and to me that's just because it's the longest temple in the game. And I'll admit I got lost on this playthrough too, because I completely ignored the platform rises in the first area where you rise the water up in the middle section tower, where you keep going up to raise the music and play the music to raise the water. And I forgot that the bottom pillar rises, and you gotta put the steel boots on to go back underneath it, and there's a key underneath there. So I was just circling for like an hour. I'm like, where am I gonna go? I know I'm missing one key here, and I can't advance until I get this one key. And that was it. So I've never found that level to be very difficult. It's just the longest one, in my opinion. But the Shadow Temple with the Redeads, as for creatures, I don't remember the Redeads, but they're like the brown zombies that scream, and you're locked in the place and you can't move. I hate those guys. And I hate the likes, because they'll absorb up if you die, or ever you might have to go back and buy your shield again. Like, those guys and the mummies are kind of just knockoffs of the Redeads, because they do the same exact thing. But those white creatures that won't come out of the ground until you let their hand grab you, and then it's the same scream effect comes out, and they slowly walk to you like this, basically, and with their hands in the air, and eventually their jaw opens up. It's, even to this day, it's still really creepy for what it is. And that, like, the Shadow Temple still to this day, kind of like, I'm always like, all right, it's the Shadow Temple, brace yourself. So like the Shadow Temple is one of those ones where I'm like, it's maybe because it got me from the time, so it's got its teeth still in me.
Yeah.
But I like those two, I think, probably stick out the most for, like, I would say if they were the most challenging in my opinion. How about you guys? For what was the most, I guess, difficult temple for you guys, if you remember, or which one would you say was the one that caused you the most grief, or which one was your favorite?
So the temple that gave me the most grief was the Fire Temple. Water Temple's fine. Fire Temple, there is a jump in the Fire Temple, and we could not figure out which corner you had to jump from. And it took me like 3 days, and I could not. I was walking around the fire temple, and I couldn't figure out that automatic jump. And I was like, what are you supposed to do now? What is this? And it turned out to just be like a jump off of a corner of a ledge onto another ledge, and then you're through it, and the fire temple's easy. But some of those jumps, that jump in particular, that was one of those things where like the game didn't tell me how to solve this particular puzzle. Jumping is not a thing that occurs so frequently in the game that, you know, you can figure out exactly where jumps happen from all the time. And there's lava there, so you're like, oh, I'm just going to fall off of this ledge into the lava. So I don't know if anyone else had this problem. It kind of looks like from your faces that maybe you didn't. But that one really got me for like 3 days. Forest Temple is my favorite temple. That one's just so atmospheric, kind of is very organic about how it works and what's happening in there. But I hear the gripes about the water temple, and I don't really have them myself. I like the water temple. I like how secluded and empty the water temple feels.
I think I went back and looked through some of the levels last night, and I think I decided that probably the Shadow Temple was my least favorite. I found some of the things in there to be more annoying. I'm not sure if this is the exact one that had all, or if it was the well or not, but one of them had a lot of pits that you were falling through. Anyway, the Shadow Temple, I think was, I don't know if that's the one, but that one definitely was my least favorite. And those creatures that you were talking about, Ryan, with the hands that stick out and they're grotesque looking, those were probably my least favorite. But I'll go counter to what Chris said and say, I think my favorite was actually the Fire Temple. And call me a slow learner if you want, but the reason I think is because that's about the time where I finally felt I get this game. Now, maybe I had just been playing it slowly. You know, I had been playing it an hour or two here and there. And so up until that point, I wasn't playing, you know, in big sections. The Forest Temple, I still felt like, okay, I'm not quite getting everything. I struggled with the Forest Temple for a long time. When I got to the Fire Temple, I feel like I finally understood this game, and I had a lot of fun with it. And that's where I really started to accelerate my playthrough of the game, because I felt like it went from something brand new that I was unfamiliar with to understanding the game. And I don't know if that's something that everybody, I experience that in every game where I feel like there's a part where, okay, I'm just playing this game, it's all brand new, and then I'm like, okay, this is the meat of the game, this is the heart of it. And that was the Fire Temple for me, and that's when I really started to enjoy the game.
I think I'll go counter to what you said, Eric, and say that I think my favorite was the Shadow Temple.
Oh boy.
But I think it was really more just about the aesthetic of the temple. Like, it was creepy, and there was like big blades everywhere and guillotines and weird faces on the wall. And it just, you know, it was dark and creepy, and actually felt kind of like an actual dungeon, and not, you know, it wasn't based on an element. It was just like, everything here wants to kill you. And I don't know. Maybe it was just my angsty teenage timing on playing that, you know, listening to a lot of Breaking Benjamin and playing the Shadow Temple. But yeah, I love the way that looks. It was like a little horror movie within Legend of Zelda game, and I thought that was pretty cool.
Let me ask, at the end of the Shadow Temple, or near the end of it, you have to get on this boat.
Yes.
You sail down the river, and I'm like, okay, no problem. And then they throw two skeleton Stalfos or something on you. Yeah. And then I'm curious. I don't know why. Just the first time you guys played, or this time did you play? Right at the end, they say, "Oh, the boat's sinking. Jump off."
Yep.
You guys get that the first time?
No.
Or I mean, she's like, "Oh, the boat's sinking." I'm like, "Yeah, I haven't killed these guys over here yet," and all of a sudden I'm dead, and I got to do the whole thing over again.
Even on this playthrough, I forgot about it.
Yeah.
I forgot, because I was like, it just pulls up and it stops. I forgot at the very end, because it's kind of got like square wheels. It keeps going up and down, up and down, because it's on a track, kind of like a roller coaster. And basically, you know, it's a slow path back and forth, and you have to wait to fight those Scatulas or Stalfos. It was the Stalfos.
I don't know what they're called yet.
Yeah, and then I'm like, okay, and Nelson. So I'm like, I forgot all about this. And then there's a bridge you have to cross to the next side over. And it's if you have the fire arrows, it makes it a lot faster path because you can just shoot the fire arrows at the bombs and it blows up.
Yeah.
But there's actually another way around to the door that I completely missed on this playthrough. Because I remember I was like, I can't open this door, and then eventually found it. But I remember I think I was just going back and forth until I discovered I'm like, oh, there's a door, and eventually then you can go to the top, and it makes your life a little bit easier if you did the Scarecrow song. If you unlock there's one little side quest where you go meet the Scarecrows, and it makes your life a little bit easier. There's your friend Navi always will kind of point to a general area where the little should be highlighted in green, kind of like, hey, and you might wonder how can I get to this area, and it's generally the hint to play the Scarecrow song.
Yep.
But it's the thing that's about this game. Navi's a good hint. If you're generally stuck, like you can't figure out a puzzle, sometimes Navi will be like, hey, wouldn't it be weird if the song of Storms play here? It's always kind of like, yeah, well, I guess that's, or a hint to like, boy, I sure hope it doesn't rain in here, or something like that. You get like little hints like that. I'm like, oh, okay. And then you play it, and there you go. You're destroying a windmill. But, I would say back for my favorite temple, I want to say maybe is probably the Spirit Temple. And after playing this run through, I guess I kind of like the fact that it's kind of going back and forth a little bit. You have to start off as a kid, get the silver gauntlets so you can lift, I guess some rocks so you can get through the holes. And then you go back as an adult, and you have to, you have to beat it that way. And I really enjoyed the fact that the boss fight too in that temple which is Twin Rova, it's two witches, one's fire, one's ice, and you have to use their powers against each other, and eventually they become one creature themselves. It's the same kind of general battle where you use your shield at the time because it's your item in the temple against them. And I kind of love that the final battle, after you defeat them, they both die and they have like halos above their heads, and they're like, hey, you look kind of funny. It looks like, you kind of, whatever, just I don't know if they say you have a halo above your head, but they both are dying and they're rising, I guess, to heaven. They're bad. But I guess that's probably, after this playthrough, I want to say it's probably the Spirit Temple. It maybe has to do with that whole area where you go through the Gerudo Valley. And that's probably my favorite track in the whole game, too. And we'll probably come back to music here shortly. But I know you have to do that whole little trial and everything, too, to get to open the door to the path. But I remember and it probably was in one of those April Fool's editions of EGM or something like that. And at the time, those probably were coming out 2 months prior to April. So I was probably getting in February, not thinking anything of it being an April Fool's issue. But there was one game magazine that said there was a hidden temple in the game that you didn't need to beat the game. It was just an extra temple, and it was called like the Sky Temple. And I think I later read that maybe it was removed for hardware limitations, or it just wasn't finished, so they just cut it. They said, no, we have enough of this game. No need to do this. But it was teased because there was images for it in this magazine. So that's what made me really believe it was there. You had to, if you remember how to get to the Spirit Temple, you have to use the Lens of Truth to follow a ghost, and it'll lead you through the Desert Storm to the Spirit Temple. It gets to a point they said, like, you have to ignore it at one of the pillars, and you turn right, and then you keep going straight. And I'm like, I must have spent like 3 hours trying to find this temple. It's like a glitch, and it was fake. It was just all fake, which made me like all excited for the Master Quest re-release, because I thought this has got to have that Spirit Temple in it. It doesn't. It's just all phony. I didn't find out until like years later. It's just one of those ones where I'm like, it's got to be a thing, and it's a glitch or something. No, it was just made up. So. Yeah. Do you guys have any favorite boss fights from the game, by chance, from one of these temples?
I liked the witches. I thought that was a neat
Twin Nova.
Figuring that out. The combination of, what you had to do.
I'll say probably Bongo Bongo again too, which is that one gave me a little bit of trouble though as a kid, and it's because he's got the two hands, he's playing the drums. You're on top of a drum, right? And it's battling you, and eventually you have to get him to open up its eye. But like, those are some ones that really want Phantom Ganon.
There is a point when you fight Shadow Link
in the water temple.
Yeah, and to me that is the best boss fight, maybe except for Ganon at the end, but to me that's like the best boss fight because it's the most challenging boss fight with the sword play and holding up your shield, blocking stuff, hitting him again. I find that my major criticism of Ocarina of Time is that it's, from a fighting standpoint, maybe not as challenging as I would like it to be. It is, like Eric said, kind of more of a puzzle game once you figure out the way to kill things or fight things.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know it forever, and you can never go back to that point when that Skulltana, when that big skeleton kind of spider thing is challenging anymore. That's no longer challenging. That's not a challenge anymore. But like Shadow Link is always kind of, every time I fight him, kind of interesting. It's an interesting fight.
I can totally see that. Yeah, that was. Yeah. You're absolutely right. The bosses tend to be puzzle based. Once you know how to solve them, there's not a lot of skill. And I can say that because I don't have a lot of skill. But that Link fight, that was one of the true fights where this was a skill based. I think a skill based thing. I struggled with that one. That was probably. And Bongo, those two were one of the two toughest fights for me, and because Link was so skill based.
I think my favorite was I don't know, just because I think timing wise, I had just seen The Abyss, the James Cameron movie, so Morpha from the Water Temple. Just I really love the idea of that, and plus I love the hook shot. Anytime I got to use the hook shot, it was a good time. And I think the other most memorable was Bongo, just because that was it was just weird and cool. And, I think that one took me the longest to kind of get down.
One thing, I guess we can maybe shift to maybe the Ganon fight too, because I wanted to bring that up. The final Ganon fight, his final form, because you fight him a couple. He's got a few forms here, but I remember. I think USA Today kind of maybe wrote an article about this, but I remember when you finally stab him in the head with a sword, that was kind of controversial because it goes from being kind of like, oh, cool, and then eventually there's blood, like you're slashing. And I don't know if this was edited out in later versions, but at least on the original N64 version, there's like you slashing and hacking away at its face, and eventually stick the sword in its face. And I kind of remember people were like, "Oh, this is kind of a little grim," but I just remember that was kind of taking me back. I know some people. I think it's one of the things you got to realize too. Like the game, almost always, it's very fair. It will almost always reload in a boss fight. Give you the item that you need to beat the bosses too. Yeah. In particular, that fight too. Like there's the walls that are there. So if you go behind the walls, he'll knock down the walls and he'll give you some more items like arrows or magic. Or bombs or Deku nuts. So like those are here's everything you need basically. You're never at one point effed. Against any boss in the game. They almost always reload everything for you. So
yeah, that kind of touch is what makes a game stray from being just a frustrating experience to being very well done and polished and well thought out. But I appreciated that.
What I always like the most about the Zelda bosses in Ocarina of Time is how they tie into the major theme of the game, which is, music. So you've got the ocarina, music is throughout the game, you're learning songs, and then kind of every boss fight, for the most part, is musical, especially the Ganon fight at the end. Like there's a rhythm to everything you're doing. He shoots at you, you kind of have to wait your rhythm and shoot it back. And then like it's an exchange, it's like playing tennis, but like a lot of the bosses are rhythmy, and it's all tying into the major theme, which is music.
Yeah, it's kind of like with the the game forces music upon you too, because you have to play this you have to play almost every track. Not almost, I would say probably 80% of the tracks you probably have to play. So I think that's another reason why with the music. Another reason I like this game is that I know all these tracks because I've played them a whole bunch of times with the C buttons, which I think is C and A, button. But it's definitely the songs will get burned into your head by constantly playing them, and I think that's another reason I kind of enjoy because they're all good too. It's not like they're terrible. It's very rememberable, and I remember I did end up buying the soundtrack I think from a Target many moons ago. Because Target actually sold the soundtrack for this game. I know I was watching it. I think either Eric was watching me stream or I was watching his stream when we were talking about the Fire Temple. Because I think I don't know if it's a neat little feature, but they, in the original release of this game, in the Fire Temple, it has a different song than later releases of this game. And even on the N64, this was edited out, like on the Player's Choice Edition, which is what Eric was playing on. Because there's 3 releases on the N64. There's the gold cartridge, there's the gray cartridge, and then there's like the Player's Choice. I think even before Player's Choice, I think it was released on the gray cartridge. I got the gray cartridge at launch because I didn't pre-order the gold cartridge. I think if you wanted the gold cartridge in the United States, you had to pre-order it to get the gold cartridge Zelda cartridge. So I didn't. I picked it up at KB Toys. That year it came out, so my version has the original tune for it. And the thing about it is it's got some kind of Islamic chant in it that says like Allah or something in it. And Nintendo, which does not like to incorporate religious symbolism in any of their games, they removed it. They didn't want to offend anybody. And I guess it wasn't like public outcry. It's just that they realized that where they got the music from, they didn't realize that I think it was in there. So they kind of were like, oh, just, cut it out. And I think they ended up on later releases just kind of doing a remix of the Shadow Temple song or a different version of it. So depending on the version you have, you can either have the old version or the new version.
Yeah, I remember seeing something about that because they had like sampled something from like this big sound effects like digital library that you could buy like on, one of the sound effects designers or composers was using like this bank, and that was like in there, and they just didn't realize it when they put it all together and then came upon it later.
Jake, do you have a favorite track from the game? Or a couple of them that stick out to you?
Song of Storms. I really like that one. I actually think that is my favorite one. I think, it's memorable. It's cool. Honestly, there's no bad ones to me, but I think that one sticks out the most. For sure. Yeah.
I'm going to probably double down with you and say that one's probably my favorite track as well. I've heard a few really good remakes of it and, people covering it. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think if there's at least another track that it really stands out to me. That's not just a temple song either. It's like one of those ones you have to play. But the Song of Storms is definitely always one that always comes back to me. And it's mostly because there's a t-shirt out there too that it says called Make It Rain, and it's just A down C up C, A down C up C on the music sheet. So I always kind of wanted to get that shirt, but I truly do love that song.
Well, I'll mention one, and that's the Gerudo Valley. I think that's catchy. And if I can, I want to tell a weird story about that. Are you guys? There's a website called OC Remix where people will do remixes of video game songs, and I happened to download one for the game Nier, another Cartridge Club game, and I've been listening to that for a few years. And apparently, in that game, this is something common on OC Remix. They actually mixed in Gerudo Valley from Ocarina of Time. It's like melded into this Nier song, and so I was really familiar with this tune, and when I get to the area, I'm like, why do I know this? I've never played this game before, but I really knew this tune, and it's because I had been listening to, of all things, a Nier soundtrack that happened to have that mixed in. So I don't know whether that's just the weird association or not, but I always enjoyed that Gerudo Valley that tune, and so I'll second Song of Storms. That might be my favorite in the whole game. And the game itself had really good music. I was really surprised. Maybe this is common knowledge to everybody, but the whole soundtrack was pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a staple of the Zelda series for sure. Is the music? It's a really big part of that franchise.
I know, Eric, I know you mentioned Nier there, but I remember even thinking while I'm playing Nier, back from when the Cartridge Club played it a few years ago, I felt that was a Zelda-like game a lot too. I felt it was very, especially the first one, felt it was very much influenced by Ocarina of Time. With the open fields, there's like this giant open field area in the game, and the music.
That's true. Yeah. Maybe that's why that guy, the composer, mixed those two together. But I mean, look it up yourself. There's only a couple of Nier tracks, and one of them has the Gerudo Valley theme included in it.
Gerudo Valley is definitely one of those themes that also really sticks out to me now that you mention it. It's on the tip of my tongue. That one's also like, if you ever seen like the Zelda orchestra, like with an orchestra, it's even better. Chris, do you have a track?
Song of Storms is great. I really like the music in the Ganon boss fight. I think it's sufficiently epic by the time you've got there, especially after his final form. The final form music is like completely epic. It fits the moment. It is a complete sum of the game up to that point. It is the biggest thing. But also, I really like the Temple of Time music. First time you kind of walk into the Temple of Time, and it's that like it's that low chanting coming from people who are not in the Temple of Time. So like, where is this chanting coming from? And yeah, how it sometimes references back throughout the game, and you have to play the Temple of Time music, and it's always a cool moment when the Temple of Time music comes back, because that's like a big time travel moment.
I'll also say I really like the fact that playing the temple song will warp you to that temple, so you don't have to keep walking all that way.
Yeah.
It's a nice little shortcut where you can go back and forth, either Temple of Time or go to like the Forest Temple, if you just want to backtrack for a little bit. One thing I guess it goes back to another puzzle related thing is the Saria song. Like if you go through the Lost Woods, the way to find her, because it's you'll constantly keep getting kicked back to the beginning of the forest if you don't know the pathway, and everything almost always looks the same for that. You have to use like your ears for that pathway, because it's all, you have to listen for her song. So wherever one has like the loudest volume of her song playing out of it, that's the tree path you'll walk through to continue to get to eventually find her. Well, eventually find the Forest Temple. I just think it's like the way this game uses music is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys, I know I mentioned this earlier, did you guys have any side quests that you remembered that were really memorable for you? I know I mentioned fishing earlier. I really enjoyed that. You can go hunting for big poes in the field, getting opponents in a side quest, because you don't need to get Epona for the whole game, but it's kind of implied that maybe you should do this even in the opening menu where you see Link riding on the horse. Do you guys have any side quests that you recall doing that you really stuck out to you?
Well, I tried to do the gold. How do you pronounce it? I pronounce it Skulltulas.
I think a lot of this game is into your interpretation, because I always hear people even call it Ocarina and Ocarina.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, how do you pronounce it? Well, it's not wrong, I guess, but
So I did the Skulltulas, and I kind of knew that was a thing. So when I started the game, I had put on my phone a little note, and I wanted to make sure that I recorded every one that I got, because I knew that with 100 of them, I'm going to miss some. And by playing other games, just by being a gamer, I know that I'm going to get a bunch of these, and then I'm going to give up and go to a strategy guide, and then waste my time going back to ones that I had already collected. So I'm like, I'm going to write down every single one that I got. And I ended up getting close to 80, but I did not get all of them. That was fun. Again, I guess it wasn't so fun that I wanted to do it all. And I did. I actually, towards the end of the game, did several of these. There were some that I skipped because I know I'm not going to be able to do it. They were skill-based, like horse archery. There's no way I'm doing that. But let me ask about one or two, if I can. The masks, I did that one, and I got the Mask of Truth. But then I was like, I don't feel like going back and finding all these rocks. And every time I did talk to one of them, it was like, this is useless. So
Yeah.
What was your take on the masks one? I found that to be kind of like, okay, well, is there anything good revealed from these talking to these stones?
I can't recall. Honestly, I didn't do it this time because I don't remember them being really memorable.
Okay.
I just remember a couple of them. I thought, and maybe this is because this is maybe related to Majora's Mask, that I thought after completing it, the bunny hood gives you faster speed, but that's just in Majora's Mask that makes you run fast because there's no horse riding. So they kind of figure out, like, here's a faster way to, get through the land is put on the bunny hood so you can run faster. Yeah, because I did it with the hopes of, do you get a piece of heart after completing it? I think you might. I think.
Completing what? The
mask, the whole mask.
I don't remember
all the masks. Maybe it's just the Mask of Truth. Probably is what it is. But yeah, I think that's ultimately it's just the reward to just get the Mask of Truth so you can talk to the stones. I don't think there's any rewards for talking to any of the stones. I know you don't need it to get all the pieces of heart because I did that on this playthrough. That's something I almost do for every single Zelda game. Is I always have to have all the pieces of heart.
Wow.
I know you don't need it to beat the game. It's just something I do ever since Ocarina. It's kind of set the template because I always like doing the side quests are not required to be in the game. It's just will make your life in the game a lot easier.
Yeah.
And like my favorite one, and this is probably my favorite side quest, is the trading sequence for the Begorian sword.
Yeah.
I want to talk about that one.
Yeah, and maybe we should talk about it right now since we're talking about side quests. But I think it's like 9 things you have to do to get to eventually get the sword. But it's like the best weapon in the game. I don't want to say it breaks the game, but it kind of does. Like you'll start just whipping through bosses like it's nothing.
Yeah.
Even the Ganon fight, you can't beat Ganon with it. You can beat his first couple phases with it, and it makes him like a chump because it'll only take a couple of cycles through him. But you need to have the Master Sword eventually to kill off Ganon. It's essentially makes that final fight a little bit easier because you lose the Master Sword to a point in that final fight.
Yeah,
right.
So if you don't have that, you're going to be like, okay, I guess I have to use Deku Nuts, or I have to use, the Spirit Arrows to eventually stun Ganon and try to get him with maybe the hammer. But that sword, I love having that sword. And it's like a lot of it's because you can originally buy it once from the one giant Gorian, but the original Gorian who sells it to you sells you a crappy one, and it breaks after 10 hits.
Yeah.
And it costs 200 rupees. And if you go talk to the Gorian on the top of Death Mountain, he says yeah, it's my brother. He kind of sucks at making these. I'll make you one, but let's, you gotta get this whole process. And eventually he needs eye drops. So it's kind of like, you do this one thing to get to this thing, gotta go talk to the Zora King who's frozen. You gotta go and freeze him. And then you gotta go, gives you a frog, which you gotta take that into Lake Hylia with the doctor there, and you have a time limit to make it there, so it makes your life a little bit easier. You can't warp. Can't warp because
that's right. They figured that part out. They set you up if you warp. I'm like, no problem. I'll just warp over there. Nope.
It makes having an opponent a lot easier.
Yeah.
But it's the best weapon in the game. I can't emphasize that enough. It's something that I always do when I play this game. It doesn't take too long. Like I know I mentioned it's 9 side quests, but it's so rewarding to have this. It's like a reward for doing these 9 things. And that it's not. I don't think it's very challenging. It's just
Yeah, it's busy work.
It's busy work, but yeah.
I did want to mention how you said at the end that the battle with Ganon at the end, or Ganondorf, I forget which one it was, but I was when I was watching Musty play, he didn't have it, and I think it makes doing the back and forth, the tennis thing, a little easier. At least easier for me. I'm like, well, maybe the sword being longer, your timing is a little bit more open. But it's the part where you lose the Master Sword. And I'm like, no problem. I'll just switch to this other sword. And then when Musty was playing it, I'm like, I don't remember having to do all this stuff. And it's because I had this other sword, so it made that fight kind of reduced it to being pretty trivial, actually. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad I did that, and I wouldn't have done it. I probably wouldn't have done it, Ryan, except Melissa was watching your stream, and she said, "Hey, you can do this trading sequence, and it might be worth your while." And I'm like, "Okay, well," because I was still stuck on the chicken or whatever it was, and so I did end up doing all of them, and it was worth it. And I enjoyed all of these side quests. I did quite a few of them by the end of the game, and it was well worth it.
Nice, a lot of flavor in those characters and those scenarios that I think rounds out the world. It's a little bit of comic relief here and there, and I think it was, I think didn't the trading stuff start in the Game Boy one?
You might be right with Link's Awakening. I think you're right with that,
because I know there was a big trading sequence in that as well.
There is. Now I just remember because I just beat Link's Awakening remake earlier last year, basically. Yeah. Mm. But that's also in the original Game Boy one too. It's just I forgot that whole process. Completely forgot about it. So yeah, you're right on that one. I was gonna say, I was with you, Eric. Like, I've done the 100 gold Scatulas, and I think the final reward for that is not important. I think it's just like 100 rupee. I think like the final one. So it's kind of like everything that's like, I think as long as you get 50 rupees or 50 Scatulas, you have everything that's good that comes out of that thing. Like you get the giant wallet. Yeah, you get a piece of heart, which you need for the if you're going for all the heart pieces. It's I think that's essentially just get the 50 gold ones and you're good.
That's where I lost steam. Yeah, once I got the 50, and it's like, well, the others I just happen to come across.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys consider going to the Great Fairies side quests? Or I mean, like, you have to discover them, right? And then you play the Zelda song and they come out of the water.
Can I ask about that? Because I was telling Melissa the whole time, this dungeon, whichever one it was, whatever temple, any of them, shouldn't require. So there's two things that I noted, right? There's the fire magic, okay, which as far as I could tell is optional. You don't ever have to find that fairy. You don't have to get that stuff. And then there's the fire arrows, which is one of the ones that's the most direct to being informed about, at least whether you can actually figure out the clue or not is one thing. But I had thought up to a certain point that the fire, either the fairy magic or the arrows, were optional. Are they? Because there was one dungeon or something where it's like, you know what? I think I really need to have the fire here to proceed. So are those things optional, or I had them and it was great, but
so I want to say, I think for that, the process of the Shadow Temple, you need to have the Din's magic, the Din fire. I think you need to have it because it's that one area. I know what you're talking about, where it's got 100, 100 posts like that need to be lit. So if you just drop the Din's fire down, it creates a giant fireball and lights all the torches, which opens the pathway.
Right. But you get that from a fairy, right?
Yes.
So they're not optional. If that part's okay.
Well, I think one of them might be required, and I think that's the one that's first by Zelda's castle. I think that's where you get that one. I could be 100% wrong. Well, you need that, and you need the magic. Those are for sure too. And the fairies give you the magic, because there's one fairy. Yeah. I think that's the one that's on top of Death Mountain is the one that gives you the magic.
Right, and they tell you to go see her, but the one near Zelda's castle is hidden behind a bomb door or something, right?
The second one for sure has got the right outside Ganon's castle. It's the same exact. It's the same exact one. Yeah, and you need the gold gauntlets to go back to do it. But there's the second one in the Fire Temple. That's the one that gives you the extended magic, which makes your life a lot even easier. That you don't have to worry about running out of magic as much. But you're 100% right. There's a couple that probably are required. One of them being, and you're right, they do point to you saying, "Hey, go talk to the fairy on the top of Death Mountain."
Right.
Yeah, you're right about that.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought they were optional, but then towards the end of the game, I'm like, no, it's a good thing that I have this magic. So I don't know if I got them all, but I did end up getting all the magic and the double magic bar. Is there anybody else to get?
There's there's the one that gives you, I think if you go and throw the pillars after you get the gold gauntlets in Ganon's castle and you go back outside, I think that fairy adds extra defense to your hearts.
Yeah, I got that one too. Yeah.
So,
God, whew.
There's four, but when you revisit one twice, so, and she gives you different magic. But yeah, I think that's what it is. It's the one that gives you, the one that's by Zelda Hyrule Castle, is the same exact one, and she's the one who gives you the defense. I can't remember exactly what she gives you the first time. Here's a throwaway question here for you, and it's only because anytime I watch people stream this, and I think it's just because people's style choice for the game. What tunic do you keep on yourself at all times? Yeah, I know there's two. There's like in the water temple, it's required to have the blue so you don't drown, and it's the same thing with the fire temple. You need to have the red one so you don't burn. But I see people constantly just stick to a color tunic even after, let's say, the water temple, they'll go back to the red tunic or something like that. Is it like I wonder if it's like a style choice, because as a kid, red's like my favorite color, so I'm always like I'm rocking the red. But there's no need. It's your choice. I guess it's your mini customization for this game. But do you have a tunic you prefer wearing throughout your playthrough?
The red always. Just after that, the red, because it fits. It just goes well with everything. The red and the silver. This is a very, that choice, that the ability to do that choice is very, in line with something that comes out of, Dark Souls. You know, that whole, fashion thing in Dark Souls? Yeah, Fashion Souls. What tunic you can pick and how you kind of customize your character and how he looks by the end of it. There's not too much to choose there, but, very much in line with that. I am picking based on fashion. It does nothing. There's no reason to keep the red on. There's no reason to keep the blue on.
I'm in the red. I'm in the Spirit Temple with all this sand. It just looks better with red.
It just looks better.
Yeah.
There's very little red in the game. A lot of the game is brown, and a lot of the game is green. So red is just always going to pop out of a lot of the environments in the game.
Yeah, I ended up using red too, but I think that's just because I kept going back to the fire cavern and it was annoying not to have it on, so I just left it on.
Yeah,
and I realized I played the majority of the game after that with the red tunic on.
I don't know. It's just me. This is probably the game I probably do go with red the most, and maybe you're right about this. Maybe it's because of the heat thing, and you don't have to worry about taking the heat or anything. But something like Breath of the Wild, I had to have the green. If that makes any sense. To me, I had to. I know you can unlock it with Amiibo, but I ended up doing the 240 shrines because I think it's 240. Because I had to have the green tunic. I'm like, that's Link. I need to have Link to look like this. I can't have these weird farmer outfits. I just want my green tunic. This is what it should have been in the game from the beginning. So I put in the quests for it. But for this game, I think I roll with red the most.
I think I stuck with green. I'm one of those people that I need my character to look like they do on the box. So that's just, I think I stuck with green.
Nice.
I think the blue is my second favorite though.
Yeah. Of the three.
Red was my least favorite, but it was still a favorite.
It was still a favorite.
I know we've been praising this game a lot, but does anyone have any criticisms of this game? I know this game came out quite a while ago, and it's been re-released on the 3DS, but does anyone have any criticisms for this game? Things that didn't like, or, little gripes?
I've spoken about it a few times. Well, I've spoken about it once. I wish the game was harder. I wish the sword fighting came into it a bit more. The actual interplay, like a block and a slash, maybe different kinds of slashes, that kind of stuff. I wish that was more prominent in the game. I wish that had. I wish it wasn't just so easy to just whack around your sword and kill things. It's kind of why I like something like Dark Souls a lot. Not more, but I like Dark Souls, and that kind of has that interplay, that kind of sword combat. But if you look at something like Dark Souls, you see very much that Zelda is an influence, especially this game. Of something like that, when you talk about timing of boss fights and rhythms and all of that and skill based attacks, Ocarina of Time is obviously a big influence. on a game like that. But I wish it was harder.
Yeah, I can see that. I feel like that it's one of those games that, it's honestly my biggest criticism of most Zelda games is like the combat is never really methodical. It's just hit it until it dies. And Breath of the Wild, I hate everything breaking all the time. Yeah. So like that's sort of my criticisms with these games as a whole. I think what I would have liked and maybe it kind of dovetails into what Chris was saying, but like I think I would have liked bigger boss fights. That's always a problem that I have with Nintendo first party games is the boss fights are usually a rule of 3 or something close to that, and then you're done. But I love a long, grueling boss fight, and obviously I wouldn't want it to be too difficult, and I know their target audience was much different in 1998. But I think that would have been cool because I feel like the combat that was there would have done better with more enemies, like overwhelm you a little bit with a few more enemies if they were going to go with that combat style. But the other criticism that I have is, I guess, and maybe it's kind of a two-edged thing because it did make me sort of dive into the lore a little bit, but just tackling all those timelines it can be a little overwhelming. It's neat, but I didn't fully grasp what was going on the first time I played it.
Eric, did you find the difficulty to be challenging? This was your first time through, and I know if anyone's going to criticize the game's difficulty, it's going to be you.
No. I mean, look, I'm no Dark Souls person. The difficult stuff. I thought the difficulty was as Chris said. I mean, if anything, even I didn't struggle with it too much, so it must be on the easy side. But I think it goes back to something we were talking about a little earlier, which is, to me, this game felt a lot like a puzzle game. Everything's about solving the puzzles, and then once you figure it out, there's not a lot of skill to it. And maybe that would segue into something I mentioned before. If I had any complaint about the game, it's that I enjoyed solving the puzzles, but sometimes I also felt like it was just all right, I'm just going to attack this thing from every side because I'm really not sure what to do. And I've seen some other people's streams, and it's the same thing. And some of the dungeons, it was about finding, it was just okay. It's just a key hunt, right? You just got to figure out every puzzle until you get every key, and you work your way through. And invariably, there's one that you forget. But I wouldn't call that a complaint about the game. The game is what it is. I tend to think of it as it's somewhat of a puzzle game, and I enjoyed solving the puzzles. So.
I was most curious about your criticism because you're not the one coming at it from like rose-tinted glasses. You didn't play it, back in the day. You played it. This was your first time playing it, so I was curious of like what maybe were things that stuck out to you. Like, this isn't, because I feel as if, and we'll talk about it in the community talk here towards the end here. But like, I'm always curious with how a game this old like holds up. I've also kind of always said like. I'm copying this from somewhere else. It's definitely not an original idea, but it's definitely a philosophy I kind of think when it comes to Zelda games, is that that whatever your first Zelda that you kind of sit down and play is your favorite, like your first one you beat by yourself maybe is your favorite. I don't know if that holds true to this. It probably, I don't know if it does or not. It's just me because it's my first one I've sat down and I beat. That it sticks out to me the most. That like this, and I've seen this with other people. Like they said, okay, I beat Wind Waker. It's the first one I ever beaten. That's my favorite Zelda game.
Yeah.
And you can see all these other influences and other Zelda games. Yeah, it was cool and all, or if you beat this other one and now you're coming back 20 years later, you could say, okay, this was good, but this is 20 years older, and I don't know. The other Zeldas did this better, but that's because they played, I don't know, Breath of the Wild or something like that. I don't know. Do you hold any grain to that? Does anyone agree to any of that philosophy?
I think so. I mean, I think that makes sense. I think there's a stark difference between the 3D Zeldas and the 2D Zeldas, and I think in terms of philosophy of gameplay, I think I like the 2Ds better, but in terms of like the overall package, the story, and the final product, I prefer Ocarina of Time to all of them. But I think that makes sense because it's a great adventure, and like it kind of locks in your opinion of what comes after, because Zelda is one of those franchises that reinvents itself and remixes itself kind of constantly. So it's not like a one-to-one comparison to pretty much anything that comes before or after, aside from, a few like Majora's Mask or, Link to the Past or something like that.
Well, and here's my counterpoint to myself from before. Zelda 2 on the NES is hard as nails and not my favorite. So maybe if Ocarina of Time was harder, I would not like it as much. And and I think Eric's absolutely right. Like, it's a puzzle game, maybe because I want more out of this, because I want to continually come back to this game because I like it so much. I want it to be harder on the second and third and, playthrough. I don't want it to just be like playing an adventure game from LucasArts. Now you go back, you know the answers to all the puzzles. So, that, like, you've lost something on a second playthrough. Like, you can notice other things, but you've lost that experience of solving something.
Yeah.
But Zelda 2, not my favorite. So there you go.
Let me comment on that. I mean, this is the first time I've ever played this game, and I know Ryan and other people, maybe they play this game once a year, but I got to tell you, because of the way I approached it as sort of a puzzle game, I don't know that I'll be the heresy. I don't know what kind of replay value this game has. I might have to wait several years until I forget some of this stuff. And I was surprised, actually, Ryan, because you've played this game a number of times, right? But even there were things that you had forgotten, right? So that's the point where I'd have to get to. And my memory isn't what it used to be. So maybe 6 months from now I could forget everything. But I think you kind of have to forget some of this stuff to enjoy this game again. Because once you solve those puzzles, I think the temples and the bosses, you're just going through the motions, because there really isn't a lot of action. I don't think.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, because I've told Eric this before, I think, that there was at least a 13-year period where I would play this game once a year. And just because it still is to this day my favorite game. It's comfort food, right? So every time I play it, I'm like, all right, I know what I got to do here. It just feels good to go through the motions. And anytime I see like other games similar to this too, I'm like, yep, kind of reminds me of Ocarina of Time. And I'm like, I just kind of want that comfort food again. I'll go back and go for another dose. But it's been a couple of years since I've beaten it. So that's why there was definitely some things, like I used to have this whole thing memorized where I used to 100% of it. That's also because at a point in time in my life, I didn't have many video games. So I was like, I'm going to keep going back to this game that I love because it's a lot of fun to play. And I'm going to get everything done in this game. And I would. It's one of those games too that to 100%, it's not that difficult. It's really achievable to do, and that's why I think I like doing it. It's not like one of those ones where you have to beat it on hard mode or you have to do it, to get this trophy. It's just like, okay, no, you just got to go hunting Scatullas. Maybe because at the point in time I didn't have much, so now it was just the reason for me to keep coming back for it. So,
well, your analogy to comfort food is probably apt, right? And that I didn't consider that this would be something that would be very nice to settle back into. And it's such a nice package. The game, I don't know how to describe it. It's such a nice, polished, complete package that I could see that. But I think it's probably, I've got other Zelda games that I'm going to attempt before I go back through Ocarina of Time again.
Sure. Jake, I know you were just mentioning the Zelda timeline, and I kind of wanted to bring this up because this relates to Ocarina of Time, because going to Nintendo's Hyrule Historia and the timeline that they generally say how all the Zelda games play out, with the exception of Breath of the Wild, because Nintendo's not yet set where that falls in there. But there's hints pointing that it falls in line still with this. I kind of like their timeline split for it, even though it's kind of sloppy, because with Ocarina of Time, it all branches off after that. The theory goes with Ocarina of Time, you win, you go back as a kid, because Zelda sends you back after you beat the game as a kid so you can live your life. And it ends with Link coming to Zelda to say this is exactly what's going to happen, and it's cutscene. That's it. Ganon does not take over Hyrule. He gets sent to prison, and he gets sent to get executed, which then branches off into Majora's Mask, which is a side quest game. I believe in Japan the game was called Zelda Gaiden, which I believe stands for side quest. So it's essentially a side story. And the thing is, the Skull Kid that's in Majora's Mask is the same Skull Kid that kind of gyps you out of paying for the Skull Mask as part of the Mask side quest. He's a jerk in that, and he's a jerk in Majora's Mask. Right. So it's a side quest game. And then it goes into Twilight Princess, which is, I would say, if you are a fan of Ocarina of Time, I highly recommend Twilight Princess, as I see it as the true sequel to Ocarina of Time. There's a lot of references back to Ocarina of Time, especially like you find out which lady, all the women swoon for Link in this game. He has the ladies of his choice, and he blows off almost all of them. But you find out kind of in Twilight Princess who he hooks up with, because every Zelda, with the exception of a couple of them being sequels, are always like a generation apart. So they're always like 100 years away from each other. There is like hints. I don't know if Eric wants me to spoil for who he hooks up with, but it's because it's Malin from the Lon Lon Ranch, because when you start off as that Link, he's a rancher. So it's all these little things like that. And eventually you'll stumble upon the ghosts of this Link from the Hero of Time. And like there's all these little Skull Kids in that game. So there's a lot of references back to Ocarina of Time. And the story continues kind of from Ocarina of Time. So if you are a fan of Ocarina of Time, it's a much longer game. It's about 60 hours to play Twilight Princess, but it's still a very, very good game. Branching off going backwards a little bit of time, where Wind Waker takes place is Link wins, Zelda sends him back, but the timeline continues with adult Zelda. There's no Hero of Time, and eventually Ganon's spirit comes back, and because there's no Hero of Time, Ganon takes over Hyrule, and they have to flood all Hyrule to prevent him from really, taking over the world. So that's kind of where Wind Waker branches off and goes down that path with Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks. And then there's the line where, let's say Link and Zelda lost on that final fight. Ganon wins, and that branches off into the Link of the Past branch line. And essentially, apparently the sages lock Ganon away, and that's where that branch goes, which leads to the original game, Zelda 2, Link's Awakening, Link Between Worlds. So that's that timeline, but I kind of prefer the middle one, the first one, which is Majora's Mask Twilight Princess. I like that continuation story, and I think there's some hints in Breath of the Wild that either relate to Wind Waker and relate to the original path with Twilight Princess. It's kind of messy. Nintendo hasn't cleaned that up yet, but I think it's a little bit fun. It's a little convoluted, but it's a little bit fun with how this all kind of, the Zelda history kind of almost all relates to Ocarina of Time. So,
yeah, and I'm really glad that this is one of the first. I've played the Super Nintendo and the NES one, but it really did seem like Ocarina of Time is a pivotal game in the entire franchise, and I can see why now. And this timeline just confirms it too. It was really just, what's the word I'm looking for? Just really a significant game, both in terms of the game itself and the timeline.
Yeah, it's kind of a hub of sorts.
Yeah, that's a good word for it. It's a hub, and I'm really glad that I got a chance to play it, and now I can move on to playing some of these other games.
I'm glad though, Eric, that you did play it on the N64 though too, because and I know there's several different re-releases of this game. There's the one that came with, if you pre-ordered Wind Waker, at least in the United States at GameStop, you got a disc that had Ocarina of Time and Master Quest on it, which was supposed to be released for the N64 DD, which was canceled. I have it on a cartridge for the N64, and I prefer to play it because I've tried to play it, Ocarina of Time and Master Quest, with the GameCube controller, and it just doesn't fit. I need to have those C buttons. I need to have it, otherwise it just doesn't feel the same, It just feels off to me, and it's because the game was originally designed for the N64 controller. And I kind of feel the same exact way about the 3DS version as well. Granted, I've only played about the first temple for it, and I just need to have that controller. Granted, it's prettier, but I need to have that controller for Z targeting, or having my items assigned to it. That's just my preference for it. I know, Chris, you were mentioning you wanted a harder game. Have you ever dived into Master Quest at all?
No, I haven't. What is the Master Quest, and how does one access it, and is it any different?
So it's on I believe you can, it might be on the Wii U shop. The Wii shop, it was on the Wii shop. It might still be on the Wii U shop requiring it. Like, I think it comes bundled with Ocarina of Time. It came bundled on, like I said, this disc that came as a pre-order for the GameCube. And people have now since dumped that ROM on the internet, and now they burned it to the cartridges, so you can buy. People make reproduction cartridges for this, which is what I have as well. Then you can play it on your N64. Granted, because it's done from a GameCube ROM, the B button is red, so it's kind of like the mapping still kind of the same, but the C buttons still work out, so I'm happy with that. A goes from being a blue color button to a green color button, and B goes from being green to red. So it's a little bit different. I've played a couple hours worth of it. It's essentially right off the bat, as soon as you get past, you gain your sword and your shield, and you get to go talk to the Great Deku Tree. As soon as you get in there, that whole temple is rearranged. So it's not only is it rearranged, but the enemies take a lot more hits to kill. So the difficulty does spike, but from the two temples that I played, the puzzles aren't nearly as good. And maybe it's just because I'm so used to Ocarina of Time, but it's just not as fun of puzzles, if that makes sense. But it's designed to be like a harder mode. I think it was kind of maybe more influenced how like the original Zelda game, after you beat it, starts Master Quest on the NES, which is supposed to be a little bit more difficult. I guess it's for people who are so bored with Ocarina of Time's difficulty that they want something else. I think you can get a reproduction cartridge. I think mine costs like $20 off AliExpress. So something to look forward to if you're really clamoring to try this Master Quest out here. So now you heard what we were, just got done talking about here. So I kind of wanted to bring up some community members here who've played this game with us. I want to bring up my man Self-Destructo, Jeffrey Hilliard, because he beat this game. I know he's tried to beat it a few times, and he said he's always kind of lost like sway with it, or it just wasn't in his wheelhouse, but he decided to finally buckle down and play it. But he played the 3DS version, and he says it's a better game than he previously thought, but it still doesn't crack his top 5 Zelda games. And I almost wonder, like, it's kind of what I was talking about earlier, I almost wonder what Zelda games you played and when did you play this, because this game is 20 years old. So if this game that's this old is still fun to play, I think that kind of cements its place, right? I also want to bring up Corpse Flood Gaming. I know he's a big fan of this game, and he played along this month, and he said it's still, one of his favorite games of all time, even after playing it. So I think it's still got the sways. It's got the people who, like me, who still love this game. It's one of your favorite games of all time, and it still holds its ground. And I'm glad. I haven't seen anybody. I don't see any responses saying that they did not enjoy their time with this play. So I think that kind of gives my theory a little bit that this game still is a classic. Even if it's not your favorite Zelda game, it still holds its ground. If it's even after 20 years, it's still playable and a fun time. I think this can relate to almost any game. If it's old and it's still fun to play, that means it's a great game.
Yep.
Well, that's a show, everybody. But I'd like to reiterate May's game of the month, which will be Undertale. If you're playing along or just want to discuss the game with us, make sure you let us know by using the hashtag PlayAlongWithPrime on whatever social media platform you frequent. For those of you who want to get a head start on June's game of the month, we'll be playing Gears of War. Over at CC Portable, they'll be playing Fire Emblem for the Game Boy Advance. And over at Quick Save Club, they are playing Terraria. If you're ever interested in being a guest on the show, please reach out to us. We're always looking forward to having new community members on to talk about the games they love. To those of you interested in supporting the club beyond a review on the podcast app of your choice, I'd like to mention that the club is entirely funded by pledges made from members of our community. We are extremely grateful to those supporters, and if you're interested in becoming one of them, please look how you can do so at patreon.com/Cartridge Club. I want to give thanks to our guests for being here. So, Jake, why don't you tell us where we can find you on the internet?
Hey, so I do a podcast with my friend and co-host Travis. We do Polykill Podcast. It's just a bi-weekly podcast where we talk about the games we've been playing or not playing or beating or not beating. And you can find that wherever podcasts are found, Spotify, Apple, Google, all that. And on Twitter, I am at the McAxel.
Jake, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Chris, where can we find you on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram under a variety of names. I think my Instagram is at Gerardo Christopher. My Twitter is it's at Chris Gerardo on Twitter, and I am the host, one of the co-hosts of Flock of Nerds, their podcast Flock Talk. And you can find us, I think, on Instagram at Flock Talk.
Chris,
Or at Flock of Nerds. Here, let me do that again.
Sure.
You can find us on Instagram at Flock of Nerds, and the podcast is Flock Talk.
Chris, thank you for being here.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me. This was fun.
And the marvelous MightyQDawg. Where can we find you on the internet?
Well, my wife Melissa and I do a YouTube channel called MightyQDawg, and you can find me also on Twitter and Instagram, also at MightyQDawg, DAWG.
Eric, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
As for myself, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram with the handle of ItsRocketSauce. We look forward to hearing from you next month. CC Unite.